So what the House approved yesterday is what, as you said, Trump likes to call one big, beautiful bill. It encompasses all of the things they're trying to get done. There are some various complicated parliamentary reasons why it actually needs to be in one big, beautiful bill, but whatever. So the signature piece of it, of course, are tax cuts, and I'll talk a bit more about those later, but up to $4.5 trillion of tax cuts over the next 10 years. And then spending increases, a few spending increases for their priorities. Judiciary and Homeland are both basically border-oriented spending. And then defense, which both parties, to a considerable degree, need to have spent more on them. So roughly $300 billion more spending. But then they're talking about cutting a lot of spending. And so the Energy Commerce Committee is tasked with cutting $880 billion worth of spending. It's expected that that could be heavily out of Medicaid, could represent about 10% of our Medicaid spending. And so they're very focused on spending on Medicaid. But there's another guy who's not so focused on Medicaid. Take a listen.
Won't be touched. Medicare, Medicaid, none of that stuff is going to be touched.
Nothing.
You don't have to. Now.
So this wasn't a campaign promise. This is stuff he said since he's been president, contradicting what the House is doing. So it's going to be a very interesting process on Medicaid, which is obviously a very sensitive subject. And by the way, programs like Medicaid, like food stamps that he's talking about cutting as much as 20%, the House talking about cutting as much as 20% of, red states actually get a disproportionate amount of this money. So it's going to be interesting to see how Congress people hear what they hear in their districts and what they say. Student loans, another big target, could cut about 10% out of student loans. And then there's another $500 billion of unspecified spending. 62 of it would be what's called oversight. Those are federal pensions. So he's talking about cutting, they're talking about cutting $50 billion out of it.
This vote doesn't just open the door for Medicaid cuts, it guarantees them. Republicans are hiding because they're terrified of voting against Trump's endorsed budget. But their constituents are banging down their doors and demanding answers on why they care more about reducing costs for billionaires instead of working families. Our challenge to House Republicans is, after you pass this budget today, which cuts Medicaid by $880 billion.
Hey YouTube, so I wanted to bring this video to you guys because I just got my hands on the GOP budget plan bill that passed the House. So apparently at this point it passed the House. We're waiting for it to go to the Senate, see if it's going to pass the Senate, and then it goes to the president. And of course, I believe the president is going to sign it because he's already been celebrating the fact that it passed the House. So I wrote down some figures because I wanted to make sure that I was being accurate regarding this. And so there will be an $880 billion reduction in Medicaid, which is so disturbing. A $330 billion reduction in student loans, and a $230 billion reduction in food stamps. Now we know these programs are programs that help the poorest in our country, that help people who are already suffering, people who already don't have resources, and this bill is going to make it difficult for those people to live. Very difficult. Now, the additions is a tax cut for $4.5 trillion. And we know from our history with Donald Trump's first administration is those tax cuts are going to go to the richest in our country. So what we're basically doing is taking resources and taking money from poor people and giving it to rich people. So people like Elon Musk will benefit from this bill, and people that make $12 an hour, they're going to be harmed by this bill. And when I was walking to my car, I basically said to myself, I said, I don't necessarily blame Donald Trump. I have a lot of issues with Donald Trump, but the reason I don't blame him on this is because he told people what he was going to do, and they voted for him anyway. And I have a lot of ideals of why people voted for him. Is not because of policy. Okay, so they voted against their own self-interest because of their own racism and sexism and hatred for people who do not look like them or people who are not willing to conform to them. And we know if you, I mean, it should be very obvious, but if you study this stuff or look at this stuff or pay attention to this stuff, we know that red states are more the recipient of these benefits than blue states. So the poorest in our country, the top 5 poorest states are red states. Those are the people that's going to be negatively affected by these things. And so red states went for Donald Trump bigly, of course, because politics has become more like a, it's like whose side you're on. People are not voting in their self-interest. People are not voting for the betterment of their lives or their neighbors' lives. It's almost like who's on whose team. I'm on this team, so this is the way I vote. I'm on this team, so this is the way I vote on the other side. Both sides do this. But the difference is, because I had a commenter tell me that I voted against my self-interest, and baby, I could never. I didn't vote against my self-interest. I voted for freedom. I voted for righteousness. I voted for these programs not to be cut. Those are my self-interest, and that's the way that I voted. But there's poor people. There are people that are poorly educated that voted for Donald Trump because of their own racism, sexism, their bigotries, because they don't understand. I don't know. But what I do know is that he's in that office, and these programs are going to hurt them the most. So again, this GOP budget plan is going to increase the deficit by $2.8 trillion. He also have a $4.5 trillion tax cut in his the GOP's budget plan that's going to benefit, because we know because of the first administration, it's going to benefit the wealthiest in this country. So what we're basically doing is taking money from the poor and giving it to the rich. And this is what happens when you vote in a man that only cares about his friends, rich people, because he wants to be in their favor. And I can go on and on about that, but I'm not going to. So that's where we are. The GOP budget plan, it passed the House yesterday. It's going to the Senate. I believe it's going to pass the Senate. And the reason I believe I can be wrong, but the reason I believe that it's going to pass the Senate, because the Senate is basically willing to do anything Donald Trump wants. They confirmed RFK and Tulsi Gabbard. So I can't trust that they will knock down this bill, considering they confirmed Tulsi Gabbard. I think it's going to get bad, you guys. We're already here. And you think, like, I've been seeing all these Republican town halls. I've been seeing all these Republican town halls, and you think what we've seen now, like what we've seen so far, that's the most that we're going to see? No, it's going to get way more intense, because now you're taking people's resources away. You're taking their ability to provide and feed their children away. And I don't have any children personally. I got 2 dogs. Those are my kids. But I don't have any children personally. But I'm going to tell you what my ideology will be if I had kids. My baby's going to eat by any means necessary. My children is going to eat. So I'm sure most parents feel that way. And so when you take resources from people, you're taking these programs that help poor people, what do you think the recourse is going to be? What do you think happens? You think people are just going to be like, oh, well, okay, I can't feed my kids. Oh, well, it is what it is. Theft is going to increase. Shoplifting is going to increase. Burglaries. Because I know we don't live in a society that people think that people are just going to be okay with not being able to feed their children. It's disheartening and it's sad, but like I said, people voted for this. Donald Trump is not a man that holds his words. He's not he don't have enough decorum to hold it back. He says exactly what he thinks. He says exactly what it's going to be, and people voted for it anyway. And I think that's very, very disturbing, but this is where we are. This is exactly what it is. The only thing we can do is try to be there for people who you love, if you're able, people who you love that are going to be negatively affected by these programs, because I have several people in my life that I know is going to be negatively affected, and that's the heartbreaking part. I can be there for them as much as I can because, of course, I have my own bills, I have my own responsibility, I have my own life. But I mean, I don't know what else to do other than just be there and support people, because there's going to be a lot of people that are negatively affected by this. And I'm sure you guys have people in your family, in your life in some kind of way, whether it's a friend, whether it's your mom, your dad, your aunt, your uncle, whomever. We're all going to be affected by this. And so I wanted to bring that video to you guys. Let me run back upstairs and be productive at work. And I'll talk to you guys later. Bye.